Welcome everybody to episode 67 of Drum Education Live, and today we have Mike DOLBEAR with us. Woo!
Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me. I feel very privileged to be part of this.
I feel like you know everybody in the drumming world, and I want to quiz you on all of that stuff, but I'm going to ask you the question about drumming education. What do you think is missing from drum education today?
Wow. Go in there. Don't mess around, will you? You go straight in.
Straight in.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, maybe I'm just gonna come in, and I think the standard of drum education has deteriorated. And I got to back that up, obviously. So let's start with some positives. And I'm going to answer your questions.
You don't have to. Just be honest. Just hit us.
Let's start with some positives. The content now available online is incredible. There is so much good content out there. There is, drum companies are producing unique content, education content. They've decided that that's almost their platform now to promote their product. And so they're investing money in really good content. You could take the Zildjian live events or the Vic Firth jams or Meinl, and then you've got great drummers producing great content. So the content is incredible. There's some really, really good content. And I also feel that the standard of the top end teaching has got higher. Okay, but the negative is that there is so much crap in the middle of all of that. Everybody's an expert now. Everybody thinks they're an expert because of social media, and I accept that that is also society now. But it's also, as an example, somebody will say to you, right, I want to learn, I don't know, 50 ways to leave your lover. So I want to learn Steve Gadd's 50 ways to leave your lover. And I've been online and I've seen 600 videos. And they come back and they show you, and you're like, well, where did you see that video? Well, it's this particular drummer there. And it's like, well, that's wrong. Okay. But because it's on YouTube or because it's on Instagram, they automatically think it's correct. Okay. And my argument has always been, there's only one person that can tell you how to play 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover properly. I'm not talking about the mechanics of the notes. I'm talking about the groove, the format, and that is Steve Gadd. And unless it's a Steve Gadd video and he's playing 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, forget it, ignore it. Okay, so there's so much second, third-hand content on the internet, and I think it's people struggle now to know what is good and what is bad, and maybe some of the good stuff gets lost in all that nonsense. You know this as teachers yourself. You know, students will go online and look for a YouTube video of, again, let's take Rosanna this time. And they go up there, and then all of a sudden they see Rosanna and they go, oh, right, okay, so there's Rosanna. Oh, what's this one over here? Oh, there's someone that's playing a variation of Rosanna. Oh, I'll click on that. Right, oh, yeah, oh, wow, that's pretty good. Oh, hang on, what's this one over? Oh, there's one. Oh, he's doing a double bass drum now. Oh, this is so awesome. Oh, hang on. Oh, there's one doing a triple paradiddle into a flam and double bass drums in 7/8. Wow, this is... And all of a sudden, they've got lost down this rabbit hole, and half an hour later, where they could have spent that time sitting on the drum kit and sitting down and playing Rosanna, they've got lost. And then it might be time for tea, and so that's the end of their practice. So I think there's so much rubbish out there that it's now very, very difficult for the everyday student to look at the content and go, right, what's good and what's not good. So I have a massive issue with that. I have an issue now that everybody thinks they're a drum teacher. And there's a lot more to educating than just going to a college and coming out, not having a gig and being able to play. There's a lot more to it. Now that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a particular great standard. I've never said that I'm the greatest drummer in the world. I know I'm not. You know, I'm a long way from it. But you have to, if you're going to go into that field, you have to study how to communicate, how people think. It's more than just having everything else. And there's so many guys and girls out there now that are just can't get a gig and think they can teach. And I hear stories and stories of people that just sit there and they're fiddling around in a book while the students playing. I heard a story the other day of someone that's been just watched all the Euros, all the games while they were teaching lessons, and you're just like, what is going on? And the importance of this, and Vic Firth said this to me once, which runs so many truths. He said, the most important drum teachers out there are the teachers that are teaching the beginners. Because you've got to get beginners to play the drums. You've got to get people excited about playing the drums, because that's the next generation, okay? And then that's where the next level of teacher might be able to come in and take that student to the next level. But if you don't have those beginners, if you don't get those young, but not even young, but those first timers excited about playing the drums, then we haven't got the platform for the next level. And unfortunately, I think that we're missing that in education now. I think it almost needs it needs a clean. It needs to be all cleaned up and then gone, right, here you go, here's some good content. I don't know the answer on how that can happen, because obviously everyone's entitled, it's the freedom of speech, I guess. Everyone's entitled to put their opinion up or put stuff up on social media. I mean, you put some great stuff up on social media, because what you do on your Instagrams is you put stuff up that's achievable, okay? And that is so important. I mean, I look at stuff that goes up on Instagram and I'm looking at it going, well, I can never do that. And to be fair, I don't even want to do that. You know, but if you watch, even though we know as professional musicians that we can't ever be a Ringo Starr or a Charlie Watts or those drummers, we look at it and still feel, yeah, but that's achievable. We can do that. We could put on some of those songs and we could play. And why do people want to play the drums? Because they want to play music. And we forget that. They don't want to play paradiddles at 220 beats per minute, and probably don't need to play paradiddles at 220 beats per minute. They want to make music. That's what's wrong with the education system. That's what's missing on the education system. I don't know the answer on how we can change that, except maybe more teachers, what's the right word? More teachers are a bit more concerned about how they teach their students. I don't ever think there's such a thing as a problem student. I think it's a problem teacher. You know, if you've got a student that comes along, and you know this, both of you know this, we've all done it, we've all had it, and a student comes along and they like, oh, they're not interested, they don't want to play. It's like, well, maybe they are interested, and maybe what they don't want to do is single strokes on the pad, or maybe what they don't want to do is their paradiddles, or maybe, unfortunately for the parents, they don't want to do their exam. But what they do want to do is they want to play along to music. And if you can communicate with that student, well, what do you want to play? And I don't know, let's just say they say, I want to play Metallica. It's like, well, we're not ready for Metallica, but let's have a look at this. And again, this is not disputing the tracks or the great drummers, but let's have a look at Back in Black. Maybe we can start there. Maybe we can get you going. I've openly discussed this I've got a Down syndrome student that I've had forever. In fact, it was his birthday today. He's just informed me he had a lesson today. And I think Kenji's probably been with me for 15 years now. And his dad contacted me and said that no one would teach him. He contacted 3 or 4 teachers, and they said, you know, no, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, what's the issue? Is he violent? Because sometimes Down syndrome people can be violent. He went, no. I was like, well, does he have seizures? Because at the time it was in person, and he was like, no. And I was like, well, then I don't have a problem with this. And it probably took me a year and a half for him to separate his hands and his feet. He couldn't play his feet and his hands. So I could get him playing time with his hands, but I couldn't get him to, as soon as his feet come in. And it took me a year and a half. And he also loved Westlife, which was another bad thing. But anyway, we'll go on. And so every song had to be a Westlife song. But I was like, we're going to do this. I'm going to persevere. And I remember just using the same song over and over again, getting him to do that. And when I finally got him moving his feet and his hands, and by the way, I think he did it up to he's about grade 4, Kenji did. But exams weren't for him, we were just trying to see. But anyway, I remember saying to his dad one week, after a couple of years, I was like, is this helping him? And he said, yeah. He said he is now the captain of his club's football team. There was a Down syndrome football club. And he said, and before, when he used to run up to a ball, like toddlers do, when they run up to a ball before they get that, you know, the eye and the feet and hand coordination, they stop, then they kick the ball. And he said he can now run and kick the ball. There's drumming for you.
Exactly.
Oh.
But you've all done it. You've all got a student that sometimes you go, oh, you're so frustrating, you know. But I've got to, you know, I've got to work another way out of communicating. So I think coming back to answer that question, that's what's wrong with education. I think there's not enough decent or drum teachers that are want to be teachers, want to be educators. They take the job just to get them going until a gig comes along, and they're not interested in the students. And I think that's a fraud. That's a con. You shouldn't do that. You know, if you're going to take on a student, you're going to take money from that student. Your service is to give them the best you possibly can. And unfortunately, like I said, that I think is what's wrong with the education system, and that's what's needed.
And something that I think as well, for example, you were describing the situation with the Down syndrome student that, you know, he couldn't put his feet into a groove. His musical taste wouldn't be one that you would start with, but then you realized, I need to teach him to play the drums, not myself, because I already can play the drums. And I think a lot of issues, the so-called teachers out there, they're more concerned about what they want to teach than what the student actually wants to learn. Don't you think that happens a lot too as well?
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to my point, you know, if you're entering into this as an educator, which is what you are, you're an educator, you're a drum teacher, your service is to that student. And your duty, you know, I don't want to be too heavy about it, but, you know, I take it quite serious what I do for a living. You know, I made that decision 20 years ago that this is what I was going to do. And I've looked into it. I've studied educating in all fields. And our responsibility is to make that student the best we possibly can. And like I said, if they're coming to have a drum lesson, they're coming to have a drum lesson because somewhere they've listened to something, they've seen something, they've heard something that they've gone, I want to do that. And they want to do it with a band. You know, I know that's a tricky one, and I try to say that to a lot of the teachers that I teach, that you want to get your students trying to play along to a piece of music as soon as you possibly can. Worry about the rest later. You know, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that all the technique, the independence isn't important. I'm not saying that at all. But it's not the beginning. You've got to get that student playing along to the music. And totally what you've just said is totally true. You know, it's the student that you're meant to be looking after, not yourself. You know, and there is you know, and I understand that the industry's changed, the music industry's changed. There isn't as, you know, there's lots of colleges now producing lots and lots of students every year. They can't get gigs. And then they go into teaching, if you like, and then they start, after a few years, start getting a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because they think they're better than the person they've just seen on telly, etc., etc. And then sometimes that takes it out onto the student, and it's like, well, don't do it then. Go and get a job in Tesco's or go and take a different career. For those that are serious about what we do, we're trying to make this the best we possibly can. And going back to that point that Vic Firth said, you know, without those beginners, without the teachers that are teaching all those beginners, all those kids that turn up for the first time with a pair of drumsticks, none of us have got a future. That is the most important job, teaching beginners correctly.
So who taught you? When you started, how old were you and who taught you?
I was about 11 years old. I went to a great teacher called Phil Solomon in Brighton. My dad, I'd always was tapping around on tables, you know, the normal story. And my parents, my dad just got sick and tired of it and said, right, that's it. And we had no money. I mean, my parents, you know, didn't have a great deal of money, so to have lessons was a big deal. And I remember, it goes back to what we've just talked about. Phil was a great teacher, by the way, and I'm not taking anything away from Phil. but he was old school, okay, and you know I was on a practice pad for a year playing singles, doubles and paradiddles, which when I became a teacher I started thinking, well, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to teach that way. I learned to read from drum books, I didn't read charts, and again it wasn't until I got a chart thrown at me then I was like, I can read, and then I looked at a chart and went, what is this? So again, I say, no, here we go, if that's the case, so I get charts in front of students pretty quickly. So I went to Phil Solomon, but I also learnt percussion because it was the deal. My parents said, right, you want to play drums, you're going to do percussion. So I learnt timps, I learnt vibraphone, I learnt xylophone, and I got up to grade 7 in a percussion board at the time called the London Percussion Board. I didn't get to grade 8 because the company went bust when I got to grade 7. But it was hard. That I struggled with, and I ended up playing in the Brighton Youth Orchestra, which at the time was a very respectable youth orchestra, but percussion. And I think that I learned more about team playing with them. I was also fortunate that from about the age of 12 or 13, I have to give a shout out to a great music teacher called Andy Oster at my school. Previous to him, I had a music teacher that said that drums weren't an instrument. Okay, he told me that. Said drums aren't an instrument. So, and I think I was a little bit of a rebel at school. Well, I don't think I was a little bit of a rebel. Anyway, this 6'2" rugby guy became the new music teacher, young guy at our school, and just brought all this energy into the music department that he formed bands, and I was the chosen drummer. So then that was it for me. It was like, wow, I can make music. So I was gigging from 12 and 13 years old. So with the lessons I was having, all of a sudden it changed, because now I was like, right, I've got to play this song. How do we play that song? How does that work? Then I understood, right, this is why I've got to do this pad work, or this is why. So that all worked in hand with Phil Solomon. Later on, quite a few years later on, unfortunately, I must be my age now because all my drum teachers have died. But I went to the great Kenny Clare. Kenny Clare was one of the greatest jazz drummers pretty much in the world. Worked with Shirley Bassey, worked with Tony Bennett, the Clark Bolan Band, and Kenny just blew my mind. I was about 16 maybe when I went to see Kenny, and he just completely, everything was about music straight away, everything, you know, playing, how to play music on your drums, you know, how to try and make the cymbals sound like string sections in an orchestra, you know, it all completely flipped things along. Unfortunately, I was with Kenny for probably about 18 months, and then unfortunately Kenny died, and I sort of was like, right, there was so much more I wanted to learn, and I was pro by this stage as well. I was working at this stage, and then I ended up going to another great teacher, but a completely different end of the spectrum, a drummer called Max Abrahams, and Max taught Stuart Copeland, Phil Collins. There's stories of Gene Krupa going to him, Jack Parnell going to him. So I went to Max, and then when I first came into London, which would have been, hang on, I've got to do my maths now, 74, 84, maybe about 87, 88, I wanted to learn more about stick control, and so I went to Bob Armstrong, and I studied with Bob for a couple of years. So I feel I was really fortunate, but saying that, I think I've always been one of those people that just ask far too many questions. I've always, you know, like I said, I was working in clubs at 13, 14 years old, bugging the drummer or speaking to drummers, the other drummer in a band, all the older guys, asking them, you know, stupid questions. How do you do that? Why have you got your hi-hat? What's that? Why are your crash cymbals there? I remember doing things like Top of the Pops, and at the time they used to say to you had to have your cymbals at a certain height so the camera could come through, and I'd be going to the cameraman, what? I was always asking questions, and now, even so now, the drummers that I've been fortunate enough to get to know, I'm just, you know, the question now is not how do you do it. This is what I say to my students. The question isn't how do you do it, it's why did you do that? goes back to 50 Ways to Live. Why did you play that? What, Rosanna? Why? Not, we all know how now, but why did you do it? I want to be the one that goes, oh. So I've always been that guy. I've always asked far too many questions, and even now, at whatever age I am now, I'm still asking the same questions to people. So I'm still studying, and I've been so fortunate, as you said at the beginning of it, to know so many drummers, which is why I got into doing one and set my website, was because I just wanted to learn and get all this information from people all the time. So then the answer to finish your question off was every drummer that's out there, everybody. I've just look at them, learn. Okay, even wrong or right. It's like, okay, why are you doing that? Oh, okay. I might try that. That works.
I like
Cool.
it.
Nice. And how old were you when you taught your first drum lesson? And how did you feel about it? How was the whole process?
I was thinking about that today because I had a feeling you were going to ask me this. Do you know what? I think I've probably been teaching forever. I remember I couldn't read very well. Or I'd learned to read from exercise books. I didn't read charts. And I got caught out big time when I was about 18 years old. I'd been put up for a gig. At the time, they used to do, when the shows used to come through town, like the musicals, they used to pick up a band in the areas and you'd do 2 or 3 weeks. And so it came through Brighton, which was my hometown, and I was like I must have been 17, 18 maybe. This was just before Kenny, so it would have been 17. And it was Hello Dolly, I remember the musical. It was a professional cast, 2 days rehearsal, couple of weeks shows, and my dad took me to the gig, or the rehearsals, and as drummers we know how much gear we've got to carry. Set all my gear up, guy put the pad in front of me, and I opened the pad and was like, what is this? Because even though I'd been in the youth orchestra, it's organised. Everything is, it's written out for you. It's there. Where when you get a pad, it's not. It's got coffee stains on it. It's got scribbled out. We all know it. We've all seen it. Anyway, I set my drum kit up and I was looking at this pad and I looked around and there was a lot of older musicians there and all the brass players who are miserable and they've never sounded all the same. That certain animal, and I'm starting to think, and I've got all the gear, so I think, Anyway, we start and we get halfway through the overture and the conductor bashes on the top. Okay, right, whoa, drummer, you all right? Yeah, you're right. And I could see all the trumpet players. Anyway, so then he goes, okay, let's go again from the top. Off we go, and so anyway, he stopped it 3 times, and he went, can you read? I was like, yeah, and I just felt the atmosphere in the room. I could feel it, and that was it. I'd lost it after the first, my confidence had gone. Anyway, by the time he'd done the next time, he actually sacked me on the spot. I said, look, I'm really sorry, but you're not up for this. I do apologise, we're going to have to get someone else. And obviously, again, as drummers, we know how long it takes to pack down a drum kit
Oh, God.
in front of everybody, which was just like, oh my God. And I had to, at the time, there was no mobile phones. I had to go and find a phone box. I had to phone my dad, who had just got back. Can you come back and pick me up? And he came to pick me up, and he gave me such a rollicking. And I sort of had this decision to make there and then. And my decision was, right, you know what? You've got to, and I look back, and it wasn't really my fault, but it's easy to make excuses. But I decided, right, I've got a choice here. You either get your shit together and you do this, or you don't, okay? There's no messing around here. It's easy to use that pad as an excuse. And like I said, I look back now and I think, I don't think I wasn't set up for that. I'd never seen that. My students see charts like that now. And so I did. So to answer your question, I took on a summer season, a holiday camp. I don't know if that means anything, but there was a job going on the Isle of Wight, which is a little island just off England. And there was about 8 or 9 holiday camps there. And so I took a job on because we had to back cabarets, or we had to play in a band, reading charts for 4 hours a night, 6 nights a week. And then on the 7th night, because there were so many camps on this little island, and if you wanted, you only came onto that island really to work or go on holiday, so they weren't just picking up a drummer from here or there. So on the 7th night, there was another gig, and the drummer wasn't that great at reading, and it was cabaret night, so I did that as well. And then I started teaching that drummer. So I remember in my caravan, he used to come over, and I used to teach. Now I'd done a couple of TV stuff by that stage, and so I'd started doing the pop stuff at that stage, but I decided that was the only way that I was really, really going to get my reading together. And then at the end of Kenny, so to come back to that story, Kenny Clare, at the end of that, I still felt I needed to get my reading really together, and so I ended up going to Max Abraham's, because he had at the time these things called Music Minus One, which I've still got. They're at the back there. They're about 20 pages long, and they are absolutely horrendous. And I decided, right, if I can read that, I'm going to be able to read anything. So to come back to your question, I think teaching-wise, I remember taking the drummer that was playing like in a rock and roll band on a Tuesday night or whatever night it was, he was having to back a cabaret, and I did it. I think I remember teaching him probably how to read charts, what repeat signs meant, how many bars, all that kind of stuff. So I've always had that kind of, I've always had that urge to teach, but more to teach so that I could learn about myself and learn how that works, how one person you teach this way and it works perfectly, but then this person over here you teach the same way but it doesn't work. So I think I've always really done it properly. I never started really getting into teaching properly until 23 years ago. I'm just working that one out from the age of my children.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. So becoming a father, that must have changed your career goals, possibly. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think that look, like I said, I'm the older. I've never been in that band. I was always in the band that was gonna nearly get a record deal or nearly made it, or I got a couple of TV stuff, or etc. etc. I never got into the band that went on and became successful. So I always ended up being the hired hand or the drummer in shows, and so I was doing a gig in town, which I sort of fell into by accident, in town being London, called the Talk of London, which was the old Talk of the Town. So if anyone wants to Google that, they can see it's where Frank Sinatra and all the American artists used to come over and play. And so I took this gig, and again, I took it for 2 years. I was like, I'm going to go in there for 2 years, and it's going to get my feet firmly into London, and I'm going to be the next big session drummer, and and I'm going to tour the world, and this is it. This is the start. So anyway, I took the gig, and unfortunately, even though she'll watch this and she'll tell you the same, I met my wife there. Who was a dancer, and she also said I was going into the Talk of London, I was going to be there for 1.5 years, and then she was going to go off to the next big thing, and we both met there. The Talk of London was a great gig anyway. I mean, the reading was just intense. It was backing great cabaret. It was a real pressure gig. But like I said, I met my wife there, and I was there for 10 years, and we got married, and I always said when we had kids, I didn't want to be that guy. There's nothing against that, but I wanted to be at home, and I also was at a stage where, well, how do I manage that? How do you become a sideman, which is what I would have been, and have a family? I didn't want to do a West End show. I'd done loads of shows and I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to play different stuff every night. I knew that the Talk of London would never be there forever because those gigs don't last forever. I didn't want to go back out on the road. So I sort of, for 2 years, I started really working on the teaching. and building up the teaching, and because when it was ready, I could make that change. So Holly would have been about a year old, my oldest, and by that stage I'd built up my teaching and other bits, but without me having to go on the road. So it was a decision I made, and I think it's the hardest thing for musicians. Every musician is going to tell you that they're out on the road, and I have to just say right now that it's even harder for girls. You know, and you know this. I've got lots of female students that are pro musicians, and it's the hardest thing because a man can easily become a father. He's not going to carry a child. He can go out on the road. He can be there for the birth of his child and then disappear the next morning. A woman can't do that. And it's, you know, I'm not saying that the emotions are different, but you know, it is different for a woman because she has to carry a baby. It's simple, you know, she can't go out on the road the next day and start. But the one thing I've noticed over the years, I was speaking to all my friends, all the greatest drummers in the world. You say the one thing that you regret, what's the one thing you missed the most? Every one of them will tell you it's family. It's a lot easier now than it used to be because we've got FaceTime and we've got all these, we can see. I mean, like I said, we didn't have mobile phones. I mean, it cost me a fortune to try and phone back from places. So I sort of made that decision. I wanted to take my kids to school, and I did. And I'm really pleased with that. They're not, I don't think. But I wanted that, and it worked out for me that I could do that. Do I miss playing on a stage? Yes, the gigs. But I always used to say, I miss the 2 hours of playing on a stage, but I don't miss the 22 hours of getting to the stage. So I just wanted that balance of life, and I was very, very lucky that I could do that. I mean, I feel I worked hard to do that. Like I said, I think at one stage I was working 70 to 80 hours a week because I was trying to get the teaching going, but I hadn't got it going, so I kept the playing going. And then when finally there was a crossover and I could go, right, now I can eliminate that. Just changing that subject slightly, but one thing I remember doing was that when the gig finished, and a lot of the pro gigs that came in were going to take me away, and I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to build the teaching up now, and I want to be there. You know, this is what I'm going to do. I've got to stay there. I can't go off on the road. I can't do it for 3 months then disappear. I want to do it. But I really, really missed the playing. It was like, oh man, I really miss this. So I took on amateur gigs, you know, with semi-pro bands, and I've got to say it was brilliant because the semi-pro bands, they were really high standard anyway, but they were so excited to go out at the weekend or whatever nights it was. But sometimes with your pro mates, they were like, oh God, you know, they just brought this doom and gloom to it, where it was almost like, look at this new gear I've got, and I did that for quite a few years, playing in semi-pro bands, and I've got to say, I really got that balance just about right, I think, back then.
Cool.
That's so good.
Here?
I'm aware of the time, and I've got lots of questions. So
Go ahead, ask
I'm
them.
going to skip to.
I can give you short answers. Do you want some short answers?
No, I like the stories. I like the stories. You had a Mike DOLBEAR stage, didn't you, at the London Drum Show? Yeah. How did that come about?
Well, I think so. 22 years ago now, I set up MikeDolbear.com, the website, by accident, and the very first. Wow, I'm going to go back here. The very first drum show was at Wembley, and I think it was called the London Drum Show. I can't remember the name of the show now, but anyway, it was at Wembley. We did 2 years at Wembley, and the organisers at the time was Drummer magazine, okay, and the editor at the time was a great guy, Ian Croft, and I think the magazine was owned by Blaze, and I think that was Clive Morton, and they came to me because I think they'd seen over those years or a few years about the website, and I'd started building. The forum was like the biggest thing out there, and we built up this following, and so they came to me and said, look, would you like to do a room? So it was. So yes, was the answer to that question. I've got a picture on my wall actually. There's a great picture here of Vic Firth, Greg Bissonette, Bob Armstrong, Billy Ward, Bill Bruford on the very first year that we did a drum show. So anyway, that's how that started, and then I just wanted to. I've always wanted a drum show in the UK. I've always felt that the industry deserves a drum show. The community deserves a drum show. You know, I don't need to come up here and tell you that, you know, our industry and drummers are a unique bunch. I don't need to tell you that. So I felt we deserved a drum show and not be dumped into a music show. You know, we spend our lives being dumped as the person at the back, you know, just holding everything together. I just felt we need a show. So then when things went wrong with the organisers there, they went and set up another show. Asked me again, so we went from, I'm trying to remember all the names of the shows, but so Wembley was the first place, and then we went to XL, and we went to XL because Wembley got pulled down. Unfortunately, it was a great venue, but the venue disappeared, so we ended up going to XL. We did about 3 years at XL. The very last year of the XL, it went wrong. I walked from it because they dumped it into a music show. And it all went disastrously wrong, and I said, right, that's it, I'm out, I want a drum show. I was arrogant enough to think that we deserved one, and you know, I'm not saying I'm right, I still do think we do.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah, we do.
yeah. So I came out of that, I left, and then they then decided, they learnt their lesson, different owners. Gemma, I think, was Gemma Hill, we all know, and I think maybe Gemma had started getting involved in Drummer magazine as an editor then. But then we went to Olympia. They set up a new show. Like I said, I think it was Drummer Live, maybe Drummer Live was the first one,
yeah.
London Drum Show, and now we got the UK Drum Show. And so again, they asked me to get involved, and I did because it was right, and I did that. I then, there was politics at the venue towards the end, and there was two different companies came in, and it was just like I just didn't want to be involved in all that nonsense. So again, I came away from that. But Ian had gone at this stage, and Neil decided he wanted to do the UK drum show, and he was going to take it to Manchester. And there's a few reasons why we went to Manchester. The biggest one was that we knew that the Olympia was up for sale. Security guard told me randomly that the place was up for sale and they weren't spending any money on it. And so I said to Neil, listen, we're going to have to think about somewhere else because they're selling this place. And the place was falling to pieces because obviously they didn't want to invest any money. I also knew that the new emission charges and the new congestion charges were coming into London. And it was like, it's not going to be long until you can't do a show in London, which is what's proven now. And we were going to go to Birmingham, but there was some politics came from someone else that got in the way of that, and we ended up in Manchester, and it's grown. And this year, or 22, we were in Liverpool. We moved again, twice the size. The venue's twice the size, for a host of reasons. Number one, because even if we get an issue with restrictions, we've got enough space that we can still do a show. Also, we've got enough space now that we can build it. The venue is incredible. It's right on the Mersey. My room overlooks the Mersey, in fact. And I'm really excited. But I'm excited because, like I said, I think the couple of times that they've tried to dump a very good drum show and support the rest of the industry on the back of our drum show, it's gone wrong. And it just shows, actually, we are completely different. Now, I have to just say before anyone watches this and pulls me up on it, what they're doing, I'm not involved in this part of it. There is going to be other parts of the show in the UK drum show, but they're separate shows. So there's an acoustic show, there's a bass show. It's on the same weekend. It's all part of the show, but there's 3 separate entrances and run as 3 separate shows. So instead of them all being dumped in together, now there's actually going to be 3 completely different entrances, run separately, their own thing. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the UK drum show. I'm hoping that all the travel restrictions will be in place, and the way that music shows are going now around Europe, no Frankfurt, I'm not too sure what's going to happen with the NAMM show. I think this is going to make it even more of a unique show.
Definitely. I can't wait. I need to book my room. Don't know where I'm staying.
I'll put your name on the door. Look, I've made it official. Just let me know when you want to come.
No, I've booked my tickets like whenever it was, and then it got changed.
Done it already, have you?
I booked it, but I just haven't booked where I'm staying yet. But yeah, it's fine.
You've just done it to get away from the kids, though. That's why you've done it.
He doesn't care about drums anymore.
No. It's a holiday, mate. It's a holiday. So I wanted to talk to you about your change of role. It seems like you've done the Olympics. You did the Ladbrokes commercial, where you're just having to like organize a whole large group of drummers. And what blew my mind when I did the Ladbrokes commercial with you,
and you were very good.
You thought I was sucking up.
No, you were very good, by the way. I was watching everybody, and everyone that was picked for the Ladbrokes commercial, I personally watched all their videos.
Oh.
So I was very excited when I saw that you were on it, because I think we've only actually been in the same building once before that, and that was at a wedding.
Yeah, but the thing is, I was late the first day because my cab driver, he just went to the wrong place basically, and so I turn up. Everyone's in this room. There's Mike DOLBEAR. I'm like, oh my God, I'm late. I'm late for the first day. I'm going to fuck this all up.
I didn't notice that, to be fair.
No, I know you didn't, because I just like snuck in. I just snuck in and sat down. And then he was like, boo-do-get-to-do. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I don't understand what's happening. And then he's like, right, everyone got that, yeah? And I'm like,
is that an impression of me, by the way?
No, this is you shouldn't
say anything. You shouldn't say anything.
But I was like, oh, I'm in the shit now because I don't know what's going on, and we've got a shoot in like half an hour. But day two was
do
fine.
I cut this out from the final video?
No, don't. Don't cut it out. It's the truth. It's the truth. But what saved me and what my point was, we all had in-ear monitors, and so when it came to doing it.
It's a secret.
Oh, can we not?
No, I'm joking. But
it was amazing because then you've just got Mike going, boo da da do da 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 da, and then you have to do it. So it was like, I've been saved. I'm okay. That I was late because he's going to tell me what I'm doing, and it was just the bar before, exactly. And it was just amazing to me. I was like, it's all going to be okay. This has really been thought through. This is brilliant.
He didn't make this one up. It's not my first rodeo.
Well, that's it, because I asked you about this and you were saying the Olympics, the London Olympics. Is that where this idea was born? How did you even come up with this stuff?
Totally.
How do you even...
Totally. Well, I've done about 5 of those kind of gigs now, because I did the Champions League final the year after the Olympics, which was 500 drummers. I did the ITV Awards. What else did we do? I did the Hans Zimmer drum for those dates. So the Olympics was this is where my kids are just like, oh, for God's sake, it's like a war story. Here we go again. And it's funny because the older I get, the more I look back on it and go, wow, that was actually we made that up as we went along. Big shout out to Ralph Salmons, because it was Ralph that got me in on the Olympics. Unless you want to know the story, you don't need to know the story about why and how. But we were like, right. So Danny Boyle, who is an absolute genius, was the producer, the director of the show, and it was like a live show. You all watched it. It was like a live movie, but it was going to happen there and then. And I had found out pretty early. Rick Smith was the musical director from Underworld. It was a very small team. We'd found out pretty early that we didn't know how long that music was going to be. It couldn't be a structured piece of music because there was so much that could go right or wrong. On the night, it just couldn't work. the Olympics is owned by an organisation, so they brought on a team that do every single Olympics, and they sort of brought on the information on how they move their cast around. So the in-ear thing came really from what the Olympics normally do, and so then we were like, well, why don't we teach the drummers? We had 1,000 drummers at the Olympics. Why don't we teach the drummers to follow instructions, simple instructions? Because 500 of the drummers on the Olympics were non-drummers, roughly, and 500 were drummers. Okay, so 500 had never played the drums before.
That's madness. No, okay, why would you even do that to yourself?
Well, there was a couple of reasons for that. Do you want to know that answer that one as well?
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so, well, that was because that process for me was about 9 months' work. And when we got to actually auditioning, I think we auditioned about 3,000 drummers, I think. And we decided that if we just had all drummers, they were going to get bored very, very quickly, because the rhythms weren't that tricky. There were 6 rhythms that we used, and it was going to get bored. And drummers can't move, okay? They're not used to moving, so they had to play the drums, move, at the same time, and listen to instructions. And so we were like, well, for the benefit of the environment, there was 4 rehearsals a week, if I remember rightly, and they were split up into 4 groups, so 250 each time. We decided, well, if we had like 500, I mean, I'm using that roughly, but roughly about that kind of percentage of people that can move, have got a concept that we can teach them rhythms. We audition them playing, so we were like, well, we can teach them stuff. Plus the drummers, we felt that it would be a good mix. The environment's better, you know, the ones that could move but couldn't really play the drums could help the ones that could play the drums, and vice versa. And it worked really, really well. So we were looking for a really good balance. We weren't looking for, we needed 500 girls and 500 guys, but again, we were looking for a balance that made the environment nice, which I think we got right. And when I say we, like I said, there's a team involved in this. And so we sort of then was like, well, look, if they're going to move, if you're going to say to them, right, drummers, we want you to walk down the steps, 20 steps, and stop in their ears. It's like, well, why can't we tell them to play rhythms? And that's what we did. So, again, you've got to remember that the Olympics was whatever you wanted and whatever you needed to do, you had the best in the business would do it. You know, whatever it was. I mean, they were buckets, but they weren't buckets. They were properly designed. So whatever you needed. And so in-ears was like, yeah, I think there was 4,500 volunteers on the opening ceremony of the Olympics, and every one of them had in-ears. There was different people. The dancers would be telling the dancers what to do. In the Industrial Revolution, which is the bit that you're talking about, at 9 o'clock, when the drummers played, there was people clearing grass, so you could hear people going, right, team A, roll the grass, and then I'd be going, right, okay, so, and that's how it worked. So, to answer your question, when the second job came along, Champions League, they said, right, we've got this idea. We want 500 drummers, and they pretty much, the ITV Awards were first, but we used the same concept. Then the Champions League, they said, right, we've got this idea, and basically they wanted to copy it. And I was like, no, why copy it? The concept can work, but we need to play different things. It needs to look different. And all they gave me for that was chess. They wanted kings and knights. So it's like, right, okay, so we designed, or I did actually, with a great team, shields. So all the drummers had shields, and on the shields, there was 250 on each side. They had the football team emblem on the shields. But on the inside of the shield, they had playing surfaces. So now they were using one stick, but on playing surfaces. So it looked completely different, although we used the same concept. Same thing happened on the Ladbrokes commercial that happened on the Champions League. I was like, right, we're going to do in-ears, and the audio guys were going, no, we can't do that. I was like, no, we are going to do that. Well, no, we can't. I was like, well, there's no other way you can do it. You can't get to a football ground at Wembley when you've got 80,000 Germans screaming for their favourite football team, and me with a microphone or a megaphone trying to talk to them. So it's the only way this is going to work. And in fact, there's pictures of me. We had to change the microphone because on the night when all the supporters got in, the microphone that they gave me was like, this is not working. It was so loud that no one could hear me. So we had to get this like really closed microphone. So that concept then followed me along. So going forward to the Ladbrokes commercial, which Ash Sohan put me forward to, because Ash played on the track, and then they said to Ash, listen, the client's got this idea that as the camera lifts away from the footballer, it's not his heart that's beating, it's all these drummers, and so they want all these drummers. And they said, so Ash, can you do that? And Ash was like, no, but I know a man who can. And so that's where I came along, and all credit to Ladbrokes and Neverland and Rogue and Siren. They said, right, how do we do it? It was a blank canvas. How do we do this? And I was like, right, this is how we do it. And again, same thing. The audio guys, no, we're not. And I was like, look, the first day shoot on the Ladbrokes one was in Middlesbrough at the football ground. It was an all-night shoot. It was in the middle of the night. Okay, and I'm like, listen, you can't have all those drummers playing in the middle of the night. There's enough noise as it is. And me standing there with a megaphone trying to shout to them, it's not going to work. I said, the only way this is going to work, for the goodness of everybody, everyone that's working on the set, because they've all got jobs to do, is me to talk to them in their ears, and I can talk to them constantly. I said, I can talk to them, and you can get on with your resetting of your lights, your resetting the cameras, and you can talk to each other, and you're not hearing me talk. And after the first, well, within 3 or 4 hours, the sound guy actually, because at first they said, no, we're not doing that. And now let's just face some facts here now. There isn't a show, there is not a live gig or a TV show that you see on TV now that now don't all have in-ear conversations taking place. Every band's using it now, everybody's doing it. So it's not old hat now. The hardest thing for me is always trying to tell the drummers what to play the bar before they're going to play it. Because as a drummer, obviously, so as you know, I taught the concept is that you teach them a rhythmic pattern. It was slightly different for the Ladbrokes commercial because you were all drummers and you were on a drum kit. But for example, going back to the Olympics, one of the patterns that we'd play was this pattern that went, and we called that play the drums so your mum can see you on TV. Play the drums so your mum can see you on TV. So if we're playing something, if they're playing whatever they're playing, a pattern, and I'm going, right, they're coming up to play the drum, everybody get ready, they've got the music, they've got the click, and I go, here we go, it's coming up now, play the drum so your mum can see me on TV, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1,000 drummers would just turn into play the drum, same as we did on the Ladbrokes commercial. So the hardest thing, which I've seemed to have learned how to do it now, is learning what's coming the bar before. Now, the Ladbrokes commercial was slightly easier because it was 4-bar phrases, 9 times out of 10, most of them were 4-bar phrases, or the first one was, the second one wasn't. And so that gave me 3 bars of time or a pattern, and then we were going to do a fill, and I could tell you over those 3 bars the fill. And the reason for that is because I know that when you're all sitting there and the cameras are going and you've got to get that shot, that actually just before you play it, somebody says to you, right, this fill goes back, it's easy. You're not like, oh, is it, isn't it? And if you're on your own, maybe you could get away with it. But there was, I can't remember how many in your 35, 40 drummers.
Something like that.
I think, yeah. So anyway, that's how we did it. And I did the same on the last one as well. The last one that we've just done is individual drummers, but they were shooting. Sometimes those sets were like 3, 4, 5 hours long. You know, you actually go brain dead. It's a 30-second commercial, and you're going to go brain dead, trying to remember. So, you know, and the cameraman, my job was to deliver continuity. I'm a sucker on continuity. It actually bugs me because I want continuity. And so I wanted to make sure that I didn't know which take those cameraman was going to take, the director was going to take. I wanted to make sure that every time they got a take, I knew that every drummer was hitting the cymbal in the right place, they were playing the right thing in the right time, whoever it was. And when I was watching, when they were filming, I was watching the screen that the cameras were on. So to be fair, sometimes I'd be going, right, okay, they've only going to use, there's 15 drummers in this shot. So that drummer, I don't have to worry about at the moment, but I need to make sure those 15 are right. And then you've seen the advert now, and then when they go over the top, right, now I need to make sure everybody's right. Well, that drummer's not right. They're playing that wrong. And you heard me saying that a few times where I go, okay, right, you in the red, you make sure, or instead of me pointing people out, I think I probably said to everybody, make sure on that section you play the crash cymbal. Make sure you hit those tom-toms. And I mean, again, it wasn't a choice for me to go into that world, but after the Olympics, I think they just thought, well, he's done it now. I mean, you know, the Olympics is not down to me, by the way, but it's down to Danny Boyle. But that is the biggest show that I think that's probably ever been produced. I mean, it certainly had the biggest TV audience, so I guess it's quite a good thing to put on your CV, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to ask you. I feel like you've spoken to every drummer. You know, you've got your cool Instagram stuff. So I want to know, who is the drummer you've spoken to that you were most excited to speak to?
Am I only one?
Okay, 5.
All right.
Okay,
Yeah.
Steve
I was going
Gadd.
to say 3.
Steve Gadd, definitely. And to have Steve Gadd phone me up and talk to me, it just blows my mind. I loved Gadd. So definitely Steve Gadd. Stuart Copeland, I just pinch myself even now, because Stuart Copeland had a massive influence on my playing. I saw Stuart many times before I actually met him, and to be invited to his house, and there's videos up there now out there of me going to Stuart's house, and again having him contact me and talk to me and ask me about how to set up social media, etc., etc. Just absolutely probably blows my mind. Oh, there's so many that I'll probably upset everyone else. I think getting to know Weckl has been quite nice, and he might watch this, so I have to be careful. But I think I've told him this. I think I was always not too sure. I'd always heard stories about Dave before I met Dave, and what I met was completely different to the stories I'd heard. And he's a very warm, nice guy, and that's not what I expected. So I think Dave, because I mean, obviously his drumming is just incredible, and again I grew up listening to that. When the Electric Band came out, it just sort of blew my mind. Everything that he was doing was just awesome, and he's such a master of his art, and he still is. But I think it was because he was completely different to what I expected. I mean, Stuart Copeland is exactly what I expected, you know, and he hasn't disappointed me. And Gadd is the same. But Dave, I think, because I learned something with Dave, because maybe I shouldn't have listened to stories before, and I've got to become good friends with Dave, and you know, we talk a lot, and he's a very caring. He always checks in. He's a very caring guy. And I just have to say one thing on everything that's just happened over COVID. I think the last 18 months has really highlighted people, the givers and the takers. I think it really has. The people that have probably checked in with people, made sure people are okay. Well, we've all gone through this really, really tough time. And I think that just shows the person, you know, because at the end of the day, it's just, you know, as Danny Boyle said, at the end of the day, great way to finish this one for you, by the way. We're just making music. We're not saving lives. We're not doctors. We're not doing open heart surgery. It's just music. You know, don't take it too seriously. Just have fun with it. So there you go. There's your 3 drummers. And sorry to everybody else. I'll try and shout them all out later.
Great.
Thank
Excellent.
you. That was awesome. Thank you for coming on. I've really enjoyed today. It's been great.
Well,